Hormones play a massive role in how we feel, function, and thrive. Yet, many of us are navigating hormonal imbalances and loss without understanding the root cause. What if the answers lie in your DNA? In today's interview, I am thrilled to welcome back Dr. Lois Nahirney, a trailblazer in the world of DNA testing and preventative healthcare. As the president and CEO of DNA Power, Lois has transformed the way we approach health by empowering individuals to uncover the genetic blueprint that shapes their diet, fitness, and hormonal health. Her passion for this work was born out of her personal health struggles, hormonal imbalances that were resolved by discovering a simple vitamin deficiency coded in her genes. With a doctorate in business healthcare and career packed with prestigious awards, including Canada's Most Powerful Women, Top 100, and Most Pioneering Health CEO, I would really like that award as well. Lois. So maybe you could work on that for me. And with her joy, or with us, is Yanik Shea, who is a wife, a stay-at-home mompreneur to two beautiful littles, and endometriosis and Crohn's warrior, fitness and bikini competitor, mindset coach, and epigenetics counselor, and the creator of the Holistic Goddess Academy. She has 20 years experience in nutrition and exercise, 10 years in detoxification and epigenetics, and a lifetime in mindset and personal development. After overcoming her own struggles with autoimmune, hormone imbalance, and infertility through DNA testing, she saw a huge advantage to using epigenetic science in women's health and made it her mission to help other women dealing with these issues. They are here to share how understanding your unique DNA can help decode your hormones and transform your health. We're going to dive into the science of things like methylation, such a hot topic these days, the genes that matter most for hormone health, and practical steps you can take if your DNA reveals hormone related challenges. So, ladies, welcome to this amazing little roundtable discussion on DNA and hormones.
Well, we are so delighted to be here with you, Karen. It's just been hormones and DNA. I mean, it's just such a really hot topic at the moment. And if a person can understand their genetics, it really can help you navigate your hormonal health issues more effectively. I know your listeners deal with things like fatigue, mood swings, irregular cycles, fertility issues, menopause. And the great thing is the DNA is a piece of the information and a piece of the puzzle that might hold critical answers in terms of what the right steps might be for you. So we're so
Absolutely.
pleased to be able to talk more about that today with you.
Yes. And Yannick, you have this is the first time you've come on the podcast. Now, Lois and I have had two previous interviews, which is why I also wanted to have you back because they were big hitters, those interviews that you and I did together so long ago now, like years and years and years ago, I feel like. I'll have to go back. I will link to those two actually in the show notes, everybody. So you can go back and listen. We talked a lot about DNA and what it can tell you about different nutrient deficiencies, but as well as how you can find your weight loss code through your DNA. So they're great. But today we're focusing on hormones, and Unique is here for the first time. And Unique, you have obviously a history that brought you here as well with your hormones. So did you want to touch it, like let us know a little bit about that story?
Sure, I sure can. First, thanks for having me on. It's such an honor. This is huge for me. It's new. It's exciting. Hormones, yeah. So funny, kind of, not really. I dealt with hormone imbalance since a very young age, before I even understood what hormone imbalance really was. I never developed my menstrual cycle till later, and when I did, it was hemorrhagic, heavy, clotty, painful, irregular out the gate. So I never even had anything healthy to base a healthy cycle on. It went straight to just a mess. I dealt with, the symptoms of endometriosis and Crohn's all through my 20s. Finding myself at the clinics and ERs and doctors' offices, probably on a bi-weekly, if not a monthly basis, for whatever prescription I needed that month to deal with either the cramps or the UTI or whatever came with the hormone imbalance. The recurring antibiotics, I think, is what really drove the progression of the disease. Because if we look at the connection of gut health, liver health, and hormones, every time you take a round of antibiotics, you trash your microbiome and just slow down the whole process of hormone balance. At 29, I had hit a line in the sand where I was like, I need a solution. I can't feel like this anymore. Found a doctor who was like, I don't think it's just a bladder infection. Like, we need to dive deeper. There's more to this pain than just another bladder infection. That's when I was finally diagnosed with endometriosis. They had removed a Toonie-sized benign tumor off my left ovary and basically deemed me infertile at that point, altering, what I wanted for my life. It was my dream to have children. They presented me with either hysterectomy or medical menopause. At 29, I was, not in a position to make that decision. Single, going through trade school, halfway through my schooling, like I was not ready to give up the chance. The surgery helped tremendous for the symptoms, but because I didn't address the underlying root cause, lifestyle, nutrition, supplementation, it came back, and it came back faster and harder. So I had to go back to my surgeon. Again, we fought on back and forth for 2 years, test, more and more tests, until finally he was like, okay, we've ruled out everything else. Let's do another one. That's when I found DNA Power. So I got my DNA tested, had my second surgery, and at the follow-up appointment, I brought my DNA to my doctor, and I was like, what do I do? And he laughed in my face, and he said, there's no cure for this. I gave you your options. And I was just like, you're fired. Like, you're fired. I'm out of here.
Fired. You're out.
Yeah. So I left, dove into my DNA, and within a year and a half, I think it was less than 2 years, I was able to reverse the condition, get rid of my symptoms, and now have 2 beautiful children I had in my 30s that I never would have had I let doctors lead me down this path of medical intervene everything. I learned a lot, and it's been such a staple in the outcome of my life that now I've integrated that and created a business around that as a hormone coach.
Oh my goodness. Well, guess what? When I was, I think 28 or 29, I was diagnosed with endometriosis. I had an endometrioma removed from my ovary, like the exact same story.
Oh,
They were like, you can go on Lupron, which is, so for those that don't know, this is the medical menopause. It just sends you immediately into menopause. That was the solution. I went to this expert of all experts on this in Vancouver, and that's what she told me. She's like, this is your choice, Lupron. And of course, I was like, no. You're fired.
Yeah.
And same thing, like went on to like go, okay, well, what is this? And why, what can I do naturally? And I figured it out. But yeah, almost the exact same story.
That's
Except
wild.
I didn't get into the DNA part until I met Lois. And same thing
but
was
you got
I was
into
like,
the hormone part. So
yes.
our journeys lead us somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, I wish I'd discovered it earlier because, my journey's gone on a lot longer. And like many, it starts with the acne, period when you're young and getting acne and tetracycline and rounds and rounds and rounds of antibiotics that sets you up poorly right at the very beginning. And then the next stage for, my generation was, okay, you go on the pill in your 20s. And I've got variations. I have very slow COMT genes, so I can't get this out of my body. And so I've got all of this estrogen slowly building up and creating some problems. I tried to get pregnant in my 30s, ended up doing IVF, which then creates huge overload in the body.
Yeah.
Could not, because I wasn't aware of some of my vitamin B genetic and methylation issues. And now, had I known that, I think I know how I could have, had I known my DNA then, I think I understand how I could have gotten pregnant then. Have become blessed to be an adoptive parent. I think I've told you part of this story. Karen ended up adopting identical twins from Vietnam. And that started me on a genetics journey 22 years ago, where I have this case study in my home of of nature versus nurture to see where is nature working, and it's the genetics because they're identical, and where is lifestyle playing and nurture playing a factor. So that's been fantastic, but it didn't stop the hormone problems. So just because I got my kids a different way, I now had horrific periods. My uterus would just like drop in chunks, my lining out, extreme
Mm.
bleeding, no iron, iron deficient, anemic. I was put on hemophiliac medication to stop the bleeding and then on continuous pill. Well, of course, things just kept getting worse. I had fibroids then, uterine fibroid embolization, and then started getting couldn't breathe, restless leg syndrome, chronic fatigue, loads of specialists over loads of years. And, and then finally checked for cancer, thinking maybe I've got, uterine cancer or something. And then ended up, because of my kids, doing some DNA testing and simply finding out one of the keys in my arsenal is I have MTHFR, vitamin B, and these COMT variations. I just need a lot of vitamin B to be healthy. And I mean, it turned my whole life around. But I mean, that took me to my 50s for that to occur. I'm now in menopause with no issues. Like because I know this information, I think I once by accident had a hot flash when I was under stress and had traveled all night on a plane. Like that's the closest I think I've come to hot flashes. And I feel great,
Mhm.
in this menopause state. But man, wish it had been earlier. And,
It
just
sounds like you had endometriosis. Were you ever
That's what
diagnosed
I
with it?
said.
that's what it was funny. Unique said it. No, I was diagnosed with fibroids. So I did the multiple embolizations, which is a whole different process where they basically stick plastic in to block it, and then the fibroids disappear. Probably, but I think I was far enough along at that stage and getting close enough to menopause that maybe that I really think at the very end, endometriosis probably was the problem, but that I could just bridge it into menopause to make it okay. But like just incredible that the journey that we've all been through, and the stats are ridiculous. You know some of these, Karen, where 80+% of women have got some sort of hormone related issues. And if you
Yeah.
talk, I was another study was saying, top international athletes, not one of them had ever been asked about their hormones and their periods and how they manage that going through such intensive training and trying to be at their peak. I mean, how can we be at this stage? So, yay to you, Karen, for your business, and Yanik works with DNA Power as well. We've brought her with us here just because she has such a great knowledge on what do you do when you've got some of these variations. So, anyway, exciting to look at linking how genetics and hormones all go together.
And it's not even just about the genes that are affecting how we metabolize our hormones, but because we're in such a toxic environment nowadays with all of these xenoestrogens in our environment, if you don't detox very well and you have certain SNPs that can alter that, which there's many, it's not just the methylation. I think everybody just thinks it's all to do with methylation, which we'll get to, but there's so many different SNPs, which you taught me about the first time we met. And you were telling me, like, I'm a horrible oxidizer. Like, I was read it out through the whole thing, and it was like, oh, I need antioxidant support. Like, I had no idea. And you think about what we're coming into this world with now as far as the toxic load, and they say that they test the umbilical cords of babies now, and we've got hundreds and hundreds of toxins just coming into the world as babies already in us. So if we have these certain genetic SNPs, that's going to create this environment where we're going to be way more susceptible to getting polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, fibroids, infertility, right? Like, I mean, sure, you guys see this, of course, way more than I do and know
All the
more about it.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the thing is, it's not easy to solve. It's complex. It's complicated. These aren't simple processes. And it's actually relatively new, even though our company's been at this for 15 years, it's still relatively new to say, oh, you mean I can just do a little cheek swab and find out that my genetics related to this? And if this is a problem, so if you think about any woman dealing with fertility issues, this is the starting point. Is it related? Are you having troubles getting
Yes.
pregnant due to your hormone genes specifically? Is it related to maybe some fat or some diet genes? Is it related to stress genes? And we can narrow the playing field and the ball the we can come into the map to show where have you got in this roadmap the potholes that you could be unwittingly driving your body into and really limiting the ability to function. So
Yeah.
that's the great thing. That's why this is so cool.
And I think DNA too, when we're talking about pregnancy and conception and, building future generations, do we not want to empower them with the strongest genes possible? When
Yep.
we take a woman and we put her through IVF and finally she conceives, that's not her best state. So she's reproducing all of those weak genes because that's what she's expressing in that moment. So we're creating weaker and weaker generations by not addressing these weaknesses within ourselves. So
Well,
then
and
our
some of
future
that
generations are set up for disease.
Well, some of that is the conversation now between genetics and epigenetics. So your genetics, and that's what's great when this testing, you only do it once. Unlike, it's important. We can't tell you where your body is right now. Your genetics will look pretty much the same when you're born and when you're 99. And so that's great. And again, it's that roadmap. But what matters is the epigenetics. And the epigenetics means on top of. And the epigenetics is the lifestyle factors like diet, nutrition, fitness, stress, sleep, toxins that cause the genes to express themselves sometimes in ways we don't want them to. And so the worse our epigenetics are, and the more we aren't aware of the genes that they're impacting, the more it can cause these varied genes, these genes with that don't function as well, to really play a bigger role and just create more health issues overall. So again, I think some of the points with what you were mentioning, Yanik, are around these epigenetic factors. They create tags that then attach, and we actually inherit more epigenetic traits than we understood even 10 years ago, where it can be transferred now between or damaged in some way on the sperm. They're showing all kinds of things that can happen with the DNA, from the sperm and into the woman, and then that impacts our child. And your point, Karen, that umbilical cords can have up, 200 different chemicals in them. Like, how does that happen? So
Mm-hmm.
this is never been more important for us to be focused on our overall health, because chronic disease is becoming an issue, and hormones are really lie at the heart a lot of that.
So just to simplify what you just said, I just want everybody to kind of get the difference, because this was something that I had to learn through you too a long time ago, which was the difference between genetics and epigenetics. Because genetics, some of them can't be changed. It doesn't matter how well you eat or your lifestyle. It's you're born with these genetics, cannot change them. But then there's epigenetics, which you can influence. And it's somebody explained it to me. I don't know if it was you or somebody else, but that you can flip them on and flip them off through nutrition and lifestyle. And there's a difference. And so we're talking a lot today about epigenetics, correct?
Absolutely. We're going to
Yeah.
look at the genes and whether they're set up to function properly. And if they're not, then it's epigenetics that is modulating how much of a role they're playing. And so what you're trying to do is it is this light switch. You can flip them on, off, or it's like a dimmer switch. So how do you down regulate the poor genes or the weak genes and make sure that you're using, great factors like health and other things in your strong genes to really play the key role? So that's a
Mhm.
great description. We're trying to take the dimmer switch and make sure that the genetics aren't being triggered, that the weak ones, in a way that impacts your health.
And the value of this is massive, and I've always said it. And that's because nowadays we're getting inundated with like, take these supplements, and this is the best next supplement. And I'm like I have like the supplement graveyard upstairs in the kitchen where it's just like shelf after shelf after shelf of supplements, and when you get your DNA tested, it eliminates so much guesswork. And that's the beauty of it, is you can find your blueprint. It's like, oh, this is where I need help. I don't have to be like, oh, well, that supplement sounds like I could really benefit from it, which we get all the time, right? It's like, ooh, that sounds good. I should probably take that. But then you can look at your genetics and be like, oh, well, that's not really where my body needs the most support. Like if I want to hone in on what does my body need, and make it individual and applied just to me, look at your genetics. It's
Well,
it's
and
I think
the
incredible.
that was
vitamins. is such a great example because you get the whole list of vitamins and you can see in green and
Yes.
red which ones are likely to be your problem. And there are sometimes hidden ones. And it was funny because we were looking at your profile, like sometimes there's and ours as well, hidden things like vitamin D that can become a problem and impact hormones. And of course, vitamin B's play a big role.
Yes.
Zinc, magnesium, other things. We can see where you're more likely to have a problem. Sorry, Yanik?
I was gonna talk on the supplements because I've been taking supplements since I was 19. So all through my 20s, all through endo, all through Crohn's, I've been taking supplements forever. And it wasn't until I had my DNA done to know exactly which supplements
Yes.
that actually did anything, right? I had, same like you, $500,000 a month on supplements, nothing worked, no result held. I'd have a reaction, I'd bloat, I'd react, skin reaction, whatever, just because the supplement was not the right supplement for me. And when I got my DNA done, my mom's a holistic practitioner by hobby. She's been studying holistic health for 30 years. She's put me on all kinds of supplements. And it wasn't until I had my DNA done that I'm like, I don't need 75% of this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
What a waste of
Exactly.
money, time, and energy taking 40 pills a day. I only need like 5.
Yeah. And even with the diet stuff, it was I always say because Lois told me she's like, you do really well with dairy, which is really rare. I was like, yes. And I have said that. I can't tell you how many times where I'm like, I do fine with dairy. Like it's just so mean of me because most people don't do well with it. But I'm like,
True.
genetically, I do just fine.
Yes.
I have 100% variation. And when I got my test done, I was eating dairy with every single meal, not realizing the inflammation and digestive upset it was causing. I was trying to mask my meat with cheese because I didn't like the taste. And then found other genetic variances that are like, well, you can't even have this kind of meat. You should be eating that kind of meat. And that's why it's not digesting. Like,
Yeah. And this
so
kind of
much to learn.
exercise and not that kind of exercise. And yeah, so
Yeah.
when you, yeah, I would love
Super
to
good.
know, Unique, what you found then as far as your SNPs went that had to do with the endometriosis. Like, did you find ones
So,
that you were like, oh, this is maybe why I have endometriosis? Because there's no
yeah.
specific gene for it, correct?
There's no specific gene for it, no, but there's a combination of genes that trend. So because I work with women and hormones, I see this all the time, right? Women are like, I've got PCOS, help. I've got endo, help. So I see trends in these reports where, the SNPs vary a little bit, but very common for endo specifically is protein deficiency, big time, like 1 gram per pound of lean mass, absolute bare minimum. Like, do not go below that. Because when we look at I'll go through what I remember in the report, but diet management, protein variance hits me hard on every single endometriosis client I have, 50% or greater. Often that trends with a
Do you mean
saturated fat
like
as
that
well.
they have a gene that says that they need to be
Variant.
eating animal protein?
Which you have
Yes.
as well,
So the
Karen.
protein need variant, like yours, right? You show at 83%. I'd have you at 1.3 to 1.5 grams per pound of lean mass protein. And that probably
Okay.
seems like the most astronomical number to you.
No, not at all. I'm a huge
No? Okay.
protein
Most women are
like
like, are you
advocate.
serious? I have to eat that much?
Yeah, I don't think I can, but it doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
So protein need, I always address that first. And when we look at protein need, right, and we look at the saturated fat and the LDL, cholesterol is a big deal in hormones too, right? So we
Hmm.
don't want to consume too much saturated fat when we have a variance in how well we process our saturated fat, because that also contributes. So when we look at protein need and you have somebody who needs a lot of protein, and this is my experience because I've got a big protein gene variant as well. You can't just eat any protein. You need lean protein. So you're not also increasing that saturated fat you don't digest well, right?
I
So
have
it's,
that too, don't I, Lois?
you do at 58%. Yeah. And that's why I'm touching on it because I see this trend, right? So lean proteins, lots of turkey, chicken, fish, lean. If you're going to do beef, grass-fed, pasture-raised has to be. When we look at the quality of a grass-fed protein versus a slaughterhouse raised protein, the omega-3 profile is different, the vitamin D profile is different, the vitamin Bs are more bioavailable, the saturated fats are significantly less. So in all 4 areas that influence hormones, grass-fed, pasture-raised hits the mark. If we take in, if we're buying low quality proteins that were raised on corn, wheat, and soy, well, what happens when we eat corn, wheat, and soy? We're
Yeah, not
metabolically
good.
dysfunctional.
Yeah.
So then we eat that meat and we're just eating that nutritional profile. It's usually 3 to 6 times higher in omega-6, right? Which is inflammatory. If we look at endo, it's an inflammatory endoestrogen dominant disease. So we kind of have to come at how do we reduce estrogen, boost testosterone, so more protein, resistance training, building muscle, right? For the testosterone, that also helps reduce estrogen. And then also coming in with anti-inflammatory foods. So really watching, sugars and carbs. And it's funny because Lois and I were going through your report and I was like, yeah, she's really got to watch her carbohydrates. She's like, oh, she tolerates carbohydrates well. I said, yeah, in the diet. But her inflammation genes call for anti-inflammatory foods, and our white carbs, starches, rice, bread, super inflammatory. So yeah, you digest carbs fine. But that inflammation at a cellular level is so great that it drives the inflammation genes in your report. And you've got big variations there.
That's why when
Well,
I started eating paleo, it was like magic. I had tried every diet under the sun, and then I
Yep.
went to paleo and was like, oh, this is it.
Yeah, you probably
High
dropped weight overnight.
protein. Oh, yeah, all the digestive issues, inflammation, everything went, phew. Yeah,
and that's
that
why
So
you
makes
the
have to
sense.
look at
bigger,
the combination of the genes, because while you have great carb genes, you've got inflammatory genes. And so that's where it's a puzzle, right?
Interesting.
It's not, and
Yes.
every single person is different in terms of how those genes are set up. And so you have to find out your own unique puzzle. You have one other piece of the puzzle, which also, and all of these affect hormones. Everything that puts your body out of balance has the potential to put your hormones out of balance. And so you also have the APOE gene, which is linked to the plaquing and the LDL cholesterol. And that's really critical because it's the transport system for the hormones in the body. And if it's plaquing, it's not transporting, which can create a hormone imbalance, which can create knock-on effects. And it just means that healthy fats are really critical for you to balance that to support your hormones.
Okay. Wow.
well,
Okay.
healthy fats balance the inflammation too, because it
Yeah.
brings that omega-3/6 ratio back into balance. I think the most two facts that I found were absolutely astounding. Um, Slaughterhouse or conventional grown meat had 3,000 milligrams per 100 grams serving more saturated fat than your pasture-raised grass-fed. That's crazy.
That's
A
crazy.
100 grams serving of protein is only 25 grams of protein. So every time you add 100 grams serving of protein for that 25 grams of protein, that's 3,000 more milligrams of fat. That's insane.
That's insane.
And then the other one was, what were we talking about? Oh, APOE and plaquing? No, there was something else I was going to bring up. I can't remember. It'll come back to me
Well,
later.
the APOE and plaquing, which then it affects the neurotransmitters. Stress can be an impact, and all of those things again can have cascades in the body. So you do have the APOE genes, which does have a link into some of the dementia, the Alzheimer's. But we consider that, and it makes some people worried, but we consider it diabetes 3. It's just around diet and how your body is managing fats, and so you've just got to watch again, doing a healthy diet, definitely not the McDonald's runs we were talking about earlier when we were teens. But if we are managing a healthier diet, what you're doing is you never make those genes come into play, and you're trying to avoid making them have an impact. And it's interesting how it is all of the diet that impacts then the hormone genes and
Hmm.
affects this regulation between your biosynthesis of your hormones, of your estrogen and your androgens, and then you have an issue with testosterone to DHT, and how do you
Hmm.
break those androgens down? And so there's different things that you can do then to support those genes, but they all get impacted in this balance. And our whole goal is get our bodies in balance. And how can we do that? Support and supplement in the areas where you're weaker to make sure that your body isn't trying to overcompensate in certain things like inflammation or other in order to keep you healthy.
Okay. I want to talk about the estrogen genes because these are big, of course. Everybody wants to know, how do I detox my estrogen? And women get quite fearful, of course, right? Because there's a lot of myths going around estrogen, and it's like, no, doctors think is this hormone that's gonna kill you, and it's the most important hormone for women. And some of us don't detoxify it very well, possibly could lead to things like endometriosis, or at least like feed into that, right? Um, Other things, though, that go with it that I think of is like for myself, I have certain SNPs I do believe that make it so that I don't do well with certain pathways with my estrogen. But yet my body is really dependent on estrogen, and genetically I'm very estrogenic. Like I'm very curvy. I've always been curvy. I've got breasts, I got hips, I got a butt. Rather, my sister, I always compare to her because she's the exact opposite. She's up, she's very androgenic. She's straight up and down, super wiry, can't gain a pound even if she tries, complete off opposite. And so for her, when she loses her testosterone, she really feels it. Me, I don't notice it, but I sure as heck notice when I lose even a smidge of estrogen. So I have to keep my estrogen quite high to have to be symptom free and to thrive, really. But I have genetic SNPs where I can see, even in my Dutch panel, when I test with Dutch, I see that being played out. Like what I see in my genetics compared to what I see in that Dutch test, it's happening where there's pathways that I really need to support. So can we jump into those certain SNPs that are, what are we looking for? How can we manage this when it comes to the estrogen?
Well, there's again, they interplay, right? They work together,
Mhm.
but there is a cascade. It depends on your cycle. There's circadian rhythm. So there's different times and place. So again, we'll do some simpler conversation on it, but knowing that there is
Mhm.
other cycles that are at play. In our testing, what we do is we look at three particular areas. We look at the biosynthesis of estrogens and androgens. We look at the metabolism of the estrogens, and we look at the elimination of the estrogen metabolites. So we focused a little bit more, even though the estrogens linked to androgens and the testosterone, et cetera. And so if you know which of those are have variations, that's where you know you should be doing some support. So you know, and you've been able to feel out that you have to keep your estrogen in balance, and that's because you have two SNPs that are not set up very well. It's the SRD5A2 and the UGT2B15, and those are related to testosterone to DHT. And so in your body, you've got to be sure that you're managing some of the DHT levels and that
Mhm.
breakdown, and making sure that those androgen metabolites don't create any risks. So it's your estrogens are likely balancing some of that out. And some of this, again, I'm looking at the genes, but it's not this is, we're talking about some of the impacts. We still recommend, go and see experts on this to be able to understand some of the more deep implications. We
Mhm.
also will look at the CYP genes. There's a whole family of CYP genes, and those are all again related into how the estrogens are functioning. And so, they'll impact how much of hormones are produced, and how much is it metabolized, again, receptors, etc. And so on a gene like the CYP19, it's an aromatase, and it can influence this estrogen production. It can affect fertility, can affect menstrual cycles and menopause cycles. And it can also then, if you look at testosterone, it's impacted by both a couple of CYP genes on the 17 and the 19, which are important for energy, mood, muscle health for both men and women. So what we're watching for is if you've got a variation, and they all work in combination, but we
Mhm.
can dive into which one of these is it that might be creating a problem. We start at the first level that says, generally, if we bucket a few of these together, is it there an issue? And in your charts, we see that yes, we do have some issues, and it happens to be on the testosterone to the dihydrotestosterone areas and how that breaks down. You're great on the strong on metabolism of estrogens, which is again more of the CYPs. But when we come into this phase two elimination, you've got some weaker genes when it comes to the SOD2, SOD2, which can create some oxidative stress on the body. And so, okay, if we see all those different variations, now we've got this interesting puzzle, and now we're going, okay. Karen's got problems in the SRD. We see and we know that palmetto or zinc can help. Some of, reishi or things that lower DHT can support. Some green tea can help. Limiting caffeine can be supportive. So that can help to maybe lessen some of the DHT effect. We know that exercise and stress management can help to create that balance because it's not, again, impacting that oxidative stress. And again, I'm looking at the ones related to you. If it's others though that are related to like SOD2, you need some antioxidant diet. You realize that and have done that to support your detoxification genes. Those are the things that you'd be wanting to be focused on. Probably more often we see people with the COMT and a different set of CYP gene variations. And in those cases, we can say, okay, you're going to be really careful on your CYPs on hormone-free meats, just like Yanik was saying. Making sure you don't have pesticides and herbicides because it creates that xenoestrogen effect, which can cause things you're not synthesizing it well, so you can create a toxicity on that. You're maybe having more cruciferous vegetables, flaxseed, healthy fats, zinc, vitamin D. They're all things that we would look at and could be compounded if we look at your diet as well. So it's this puzzle piece, and then if we see it's COMTs, which is my problem, very poor COMTs, very slow. I know I need antioxidants, but I need B5, B9, B12, and I get those COMTs down regulate all of those supplements and vitamins for me. I need more magnesium, and because I don't get rid of it easily, it puts more pressure on my liver, which needs to keep detoxifying. So glutathione might be important, or some milk thistle. So I've sort of talked a little bit about your story and my story, and I know some of it's in Yanik's, but it's really, we look at the puzzle there of what have you got, and then how can we support recommendations there?
And put it all together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a little bit
interesting.
different from one person to the next, right? Like when we look at somebody's chart, you've got 100% variant in oxidative protection. Somebody might have 100 in COMT, or have a bigger variant in metabolism of estrogen. So the lifestyle habits and supplements and foods recommended would vary to support that genetic variance, right? So if one calls for more B vitamins, the other one calls for more antioxidants, which one's more variated? Where do we start?
Yeah.
So it gives you a very precise plan. Like you said earlier, it eliminates the guesswork. It really does.
And those were just the hormone genes. Yes, I have my vice president busy at work here and very insistent. I can't put
She's got her cat crawling on her as she's talking. The cat doesn't want to leave her alone today.
Only when I'm on Zoom,
of course.
it seems.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, so then the detoxification pathways can be important. The methylation pathways are important. Again, some of the other pathways in the body are important. They all do interlink. So those were just the hormone genes where we're trying to get what's the little pattern, this little sort of click list here of which of the things that are going to be more important to keep you healthy.
A big, very popular supplement is D-indole methane. And I warn women about this all the time for various reasons, because every woman, I swear, is on DIM, or that she thinks that she needs to be on DIM. I have a blog post about estrogen dominance. It's one of the most visited pages of my 1,000-something page website. And every woman that I speak to, it's like, oh, I was put on DIM. I was put on DIM. I was put on DIM by my practitioner to help me metabolize estrogen. And if you don't know where your problem lies, as far as, are you having problems with phase 1 detoxification or phase 2 detoxification? Maybe you're not a good methylator, and you start taking DIM and you start dumping these estrogen metabolites into your body, and you don't have that methylation support, your body will not get rid of it very well, and you could actually feel worse. And so
you could actually recycle it.
And then I was going to say that, recycle it, which is,
yeah.
So let's talk about methylation, phase 1, phase 2. So phase 2 is methylation, but ladies, please explain how your genes can affect this very hot topic of methylation.
Well, so methylation is it's there's been a lot more podcasts recently on it, and so it's
Yeah.
really it's basically how your body uses and keeps everything running smoothly. It's a bit of the housekeeper function for your cells, and so what it's doing is detoxifying hormones like estrogen, supporting healthy brain function and mood, and protecting your cells from damage. So we're trying to. It's an important process that really supports overall health. It's a process called a methyl group. It impacts, again, DNA synthesis. It gets added to other molecules, but it's basically like adding a tag that tells your body what to do with specific molecules. So everything from hormones to stress. So a critical function is this hormone detoxification. So we'll maybe focus on that part. And this methylation is needed for the breakdown, the clearance, of these hormones, and particularly estrogen. And it'll also affect cortisol, testosterone, progesterone, et cetera, just to keep this balance and that you prevent a metabolite buildup. And so without proper methylation, you can get metabolites, and there's things called 2-hydroxyestrone, 4-hydroxyestrone, and 16A hydroxyestrone. And 2 is more benign, 4 gets a bit more oxidative stress, 16A is even harder. And if you have too much of that, that's where you start getting hormone sensitive issues that can lead to cancers, et cetera. So again, this methylation process is critical, and you need to keep it supported to make sure that you're not impacting that. So if the methylation pathway is impaired due to SNPs like MTHFR, COMT, MTRR, we have a whole series of them that we test for, you can get hormonal balances such as estrogen dominance, which increases your risk of PMS, PCOS, fibroids, endometriosis. You can get a testosterone imbalance, which can lead to acne, hair loss, and this androgen dominance. You can get cortisol deregulation, which impacts stress, adrenal fatigue, and you can get a thyroid dysfunction. So that's a lot of that's a
A
lot
lot
of
of
issues.
hormonal issues,
That's a lot of hormonal
which we
issues.
see all the time.
Exactly. And so this goes back to this putting this puzzle together. Is the problem more in your hormone genes? Is it more in some of these methylation genes that might be blocking pathways or causing an imbalance? Or is there some other place in your genetics that might be impacting it? So hormones seem to be the ones that get just so impacted by when these things are out. And so the more knowledge you have on it, the better.
Wow. Oh my God.
Well,
It's
and
it's like very overwhelming, to be
Well,
honest.
it is, but the thing is, what we try to do when we're presenting is just red and green, and here's your recommendations, right? Because this
Yes.
is
Yeah.
so complex, and so we want to leave the complicated parts out. But that part of this podcast was around going into a bit more detail on the
I
genes and
wanted to. Yes.
functions.
Yeah.
So, but the simple thing is, if you've got methylation issues, again, healthy forms of dairy and meat and vitamin B. Like just take
Hmm.
methylated vitamin Bs, and that will start boosting. And actually, most people just need methylated complex vitamin Bs, without testing anything. Most women over 50 need it, and most people do in general.
I'd say 95% of the clients that I review not only have methylation variations, but also vitamin B absorption variations in the vitamin mineral section, which you also have. So already you're not absorbing your B vitamins from your food, and then methylation is adding the methyl group to the B vitamin for the body to actually use. So making it bioavailable. Without that methylation process, you might be eating your Bs, but you're not absorbing them because they're not being converted to the bioavailable form. The liver needs these to function, and the liver is our master detoxifier. So if our liver is not getting the B vitamins it needs, it's not carrying out its functions properly. And it regulates everything in your body: sex hormones, thyroid hormone, bile production, gut health, lining building. It really drives everything. And when we have a healthy liver, the liver can help repair organs in the body. It can rejuvenate itself and others. It's the only one in the body that can do that. But it needs those bioavailable B vitamins, or else over time becomes congested and malfunctions. And then we end up with hypothyroid, endometriosis, PCOS, Crohn's, colitis, diverticulitis, polyps, like you name it. It all stems from just a really congested body.
And what about the difference between the over methylator and the under methylator? Because I'll see that on Dutch tests, and I have researched overmethylation so often and I can never find any information. All I see is you just don't do anything about that. Like you do something about undermethylation and you can support it with methylated B vitamins and other types of Bs. But the overmethylation, I've read that you should actually still take Bs, which doesn't really make sense to me, but yeah. So what's the difference?
Uh, when somebody's an overmethylator, we would just say be careful about the bees that you're taking. You don't want a methylated form because it's making the bees even more bioactive and available to you. So we would definitely say don't take,
Okay.
again, the methylated bees, and be careful. Try, and then I would really just be focusing on bees out of diet. So that's how I would be approaching it. Unique, what are your thoughts?
I've never studied it, so I don't know. I've never actually researched under versus over. I just automatically, if I see variations in methylation, I say take an activated. I say activated versus methylated. So there's a difference there. I say take an activated whole food B complex and it should be fine. And I've never had anybody come back to me saying it didn't work or gave me a reaction, nothing. It's just here, take an activated whole food B complex. This helps here, here, here. There you go. And I like all the time get great
Interesting.
feedback. So
Well, I was told I went to a genetic specialist in Vancouver and had her look at them. And I'm an overmethylator. So she had my Dutch test. She was a hormone naturopathic doctor who also is a genetic expert. She's brilliant. Dr. Seema Canwal. I don't know if you've
Seema
heard of
works
oh,
her.
we
with
were just
us.
talking about her this morning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Seema
Oh,
works
no way.
closely with us. Yeah, and she can take clients online, so she is outstanding. She's done more
She
research
is.
than almost any naturopathic doctor that we've worked with in terms of really understanding how you do genetics for recommendations. So I'm delighted.
Oh, that makes me so happy because she's one of my favorite people. Like I
Yeah,
absolutely love her. We're
we're
good
having coffee next
friends,
week.
and I'm like, I keep telling her that she needs to just start teaching genetics stuff.
I know
Like, get
she's
into the
amazing.
world of teaching. You need to educate because you're brilliant.
Yeah.
And she was the one person that was like, okay, you overmethylate, and you could see it on my Dutch. And so she said you should be taking homocysteine B vitamin, like B supportive vitamins. And so there was a product by Designs for Health called homocysteine B Supreme. And she's like, that's what you need to be taking. And she was explaining to me kind of how it worked. And so that's always just kind of what I've run on. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna take what Seema told me, and and that's what I'll recommend to my clients because there's not really any information about that and what to do.
Well, this is a really important piece, Karen. So we can tell you on your genetics where there are problems, but we can't tell if your body is overmethylating. And so like
Hmm.
so that's
Hmm.
where you're getting that in the genetics in sorry in the Dutch test, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so what we'll tend to do is be able to say, okay, where do we know that there are variations? And you don't have very much in the MTHFR, so it's interesting that you other things are causing for you to overmethylate. So that's the importance
Hmm.
of actually you need to look at a more balanced and holistic approach. But this is just the great starting piece for information.
Yeah.
So there's a couple differences between undermethylation and overmethylation if I look it up really quick, which actually makes sense to me. So undermethylation, low serotonin, low dopamine, high histamine, perfectionism, anxiety, depression, OCD. I'm this person. This is you and I, Lois. Overmethylation, low histamine, high serotonin and dopamine, fatigue, brain fog, sensitivity to environmental triggers. A little bit different.
Yeah.
So is that you,
It is, but
Karen?
I have high histamine problems. I have a lot of histamine issues, but everything
That
else
might be in the
is.
foods you're eating. You can eat a lot of high histamine
Mm.
foods that'll also give you, that's like red meat,
I try and
strawberries.
keep away because I know the
Okay.
triggers now. Yeah.
Both recommend B vitamins, but with an undermethylator, zinc, magnesium, which I've got big variations in. Overmethylator, vitamin C and antioxidants, which you have big variances in.
Yes. Yeah.
So very cool.
Very cool.
So overmethylation, you need the antioxidants to mitigate the oxidative stress because you're creating excess oxidation or
But you
oxidative
do.
stress.
Yeah.
So your
Okay.
vitamin C, so the high dopamine, vitamin C also regulates your dopamine and your cortisol. So
Mm.
your that high anxiety, it just calms you down. It helps a lot in the COMT function, actually.
Okay. Wow.
So if we look at COMT, that's your estrogen metabolization, dopamine, and adrenaline. So your fight or flight response, you're probably high anxiety naturally.
Yeah, I mean, I run on on not anxiety on that. I run up here, and
Dopamine,
yeah,
just high energy,
go go
thrive
go
on
go
life
go. Yeah,
all the
type
time.
A.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Type A, yeah. So you would benefit greatly from hitting your protein target every day. That helps a lot
yeah.
with cortisol and parasympathetic system. Vitamin C helps tremendous as well.
Okay,
So
but
I'd be
so
hitting that protein target as
what
much as possible.
about cortisol? Because what SNPs tell
You
like
don't have cortisol variants.
but what's okay, so in general, what can a DNA test tell us about how we manage stress?
Well, we can see
So you
if you've
have
got
good cortisol
genetically.
response, and then you have variation in your COMT. And COMT plays on the dopamine stress response. That's where we see anxiety, depression, OCD when there's a dysregulation. So again, your B vitamins, vitamin C, protein, like all these healthy habits that we do for hormones, we see again in the COMT. They kind of play on both aspects. But yeah, I could see you being type A, go, go, go all the time. I can.
So we do have a cortisol section in our brain power report.
Yeah.
Yours is green. It's serpinase 6, which is, and it doesn't fully capture all stress. What we do is like I mean, there's so many genes that you can test for. So but we're looking at sort of some critical ones, and again, so we don't see immediate flags on your cortisol, but it can happen through other reasons as well. So just be aware of that.
Is there genetic SNPs that make it so that we don't metabolize our cortisol very well? Like slower
Absolutely.
metabolism of cortisol?
Well, that falls back into detoxification and the COMTs. Like, so that's how well you're breaking because those break down hormones and they break down drugs and they break down. So people who are to break that down slowly can hold more stress in their body, which again puts the oxidative stress in. So again, yes is the answer, but it's the genes do multiple things, right? So these COMT genes can affect stress and they can affect breakdown of lots of different things in your hormones and others. So you'll see it in different areas in the report.
And isn't there a section in the report too about dopamine too, like the neurotransmitters,
That's your
serotonin, dopamine?
COMT.
Okay, okay. Because
Mhm.
that I've read some stuff about that was really interesting. Like if you can find out if you like don't produce dopamine very well, like you might be somebody that's constantly seeking dopamine hits, like you're addicted to it, you're trying to get more of it because you've got some sort of the genes that make it so that you don't produce very much. But that's comped.
Yeah.
I want to bring you a tidbit of information specific to your report because you've got the
Okay.
emotional eating gene and carbs. Okay, we're talking about carbs, inflammation, endometriosis. Carbs provide a dopamine effect in the brain. So if you're hunting dopamine, type A, busy all the time, probably don't eat. And when you do, it's like, I just want something now.
Yeah.
And it's a high, quick sugar snack.
Maybe, Unique, maybe,
Yeah,
yes.
calling you out.
Middle of
So
the afternoon, that's what I'm doing.
right. Yeah. Oh, didn't have time to eat lunch. Sure, I'll have a donut over here. Yeah. Whoever brought those in, that's sweet. Thanks. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
we just don't, just so your listeners know, we don't bring those things into our
no,
home.
we don't
To
do
make
that.
sure we
Just
are not
saying.
consuming them.
Yeah. People are bringing donuts to the office. Don't have them unless you're having a protein shake first. Okay. But yeah, so really hitting that protein target, right, to keep that satiation throughout the day because you do have that emotional eating gene and then the COMT with that dopamine. So naturally, if you're hunting for dopamine, you'll connect dopamine to food and go for carbs first. You also
Mm.
have variations in your sugar craving. So I could see you being a carbo, like wanting carbs all the time.
But she's gone
No, not
paleo
at
now,
all.
right? So, mhm.
No? Oh, cool.
No, I'm
Good.
not. Yeah, I've never
Oh,
had a
good.
food addiction. Yeah, thankfully.
Well,
I
as
am like the person that searches out carbs in the afternoon, and because I won't eat for a long time, and then I'm like I'm starving, and I want something that's going to give me a blood sugar hit fast. So I am guilty of that, and I was a carb addict growing up. Like as a teenager, I've really, really,
Before you
really
knew better,
struggled
right?
with it. Exactly. And I was
Yeah.
raised on carbs. My mom was like the carb, like it was all no fat, low fat, vegetarian, high carb. And I had major eating disorders. I was a bulimic for several years because I was a carb junkie. And then I hit like 20s and I just didn't, I don't know, something shifted for me. And then eventually I found paleo. And then so now since then I haven't, I don't live on carbs anymore, but my blood, I have very unstable blood sugar. So I had to switch my diet to a paleo-based diet with lower carbs because that's where I felt best for sure.
So
Yeah.
I see the before 20 in your chart very easily.
Okay. Right. Yeah. And I've got the
I think
fat
we get,
gene too, which
yeah,
may
but we
like,
get to a
yeah.
point where we just want better, right? So yeah, we find solutions, so that makes sense. But the childhood patterns up till 20 years old of carbs, carbs, carbs driving the estrogen dominance, like it's all right here. So that makes sense.
Wow.
Especially the vegetarian lifestyle, right? And I want to touch on this
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
so many women do not want to give up their vegetarian vegan lifestyle, and it is driving that hormone imbalance so hard. So when I had
Yeah.
my test done, probably 10 years ago now, I had my test done and I was like, I want to be a vegetarian. And it was Carmen who did my report. She's like, no way. There is no way you could ever be a vegetarian or a vegan. Your protein need is way too high. And if you were to get it from plants, you'd get too many carbs and your macros would be out. Like you need so much protein, you cannot be a vegetarian. So you, same thing, right? You're saying, oh,
Yes.
that variant for meat protein, same thing. So
Do
the
you ever
smaller the
see those?
variant in the protein need, the more suited a vegetarian vegan lifestyle would be, sure. But yeah,
Okay.
the vegetarian vegan would drive estrogen dominance with these protein, saturated fat, carb variances we see.
So you do see a genetic profile though that would you ever say like, oh yeah, you should be vegan or vegetarian?
No, I would never say you should be vegan or
Would never
vegetarian. I
say
say
that.
your genes support that lifestyle if you choose. However, I always caution on the protein because when we go,
Yes.
vegan or vegetarian, and a lot of the foods that are now marketed as vegan, vegetarian friendly,
I
like
know. Yeah.
just loaded with fillers and inflammatory ingredients that drive blood sugar imbalance. Like it's detrimental to hormones. So regardless of the profile, even if they don't have a big protein gene variant, they often have a big carb or insulin or starch variant. So they're still not suited for a heavy carb meal plan or nutrition plan, right? Uh, Despite the differences in the genetic profiles I see, I'd say a common, very, very common macro split would be about 45 to 50% protein, 20% fats, maybe 25, 30 if they've got better tolerance for healthy fats, and the rest in a low glycemic carbohydrate. So like the very paleo Mediterranean style nutrition. I'd say 90, 95% of people suit that style of a nutrition plan.
That's great. Yeah, because I've just seen that in practice, in clinical practice. That's what I've seen. And my whole group, I have a membership group for perimenopausal and menopausal women, and we give out a meal plan. And it is based on what I have seen work best for thousands of women that I've worked with, which is that it is a paleo based, low inflammatory, low glycemic, and we cycle the carbs because we see that that also works best. But most women have to stay in that like happy little place where sometimes it's lowered and then you get up a little bit. That's fine, but just cycling that in and out and it does. And tell people that all the time, like, this is just what I've seen work. Like diet fads, they come and go, but this is one that I have seen work now for 15 years for the
Yeah.
majority of my clientele. So same thing. I'm so happy that you said that you kind of like have found the same with looking at
And we would say
genetics.
then you can get more insight then from your DNA. We can see how are your carbs, fats,
Yeah.
proteins, insulin, et cetera, structured, and how are your gluten and your lactose, so that we can you get the evidence that you need then to show you, oh yeah, no, I'm not really supposed to have dairy. Like that's going to be a problem. Or you do have, some challenging gluten genes. So you need to really be careful then, where are you getting any of these sources from? So it just gives you again that another level of detail that just makes it easier to put your diet together.
Yeah.
Well, and the
It
macro
just,
is such a generic, like macro counting is so generic, right? You can give anybody a macro split. I think where the genetics come in play is really learning the nutritional deficiencies that you have to start to incorporate foods that are really high in those nutrients. Everyone's like, oh, give me a supplement, give me a supplement, give me a Well, yeah, but we can eat a lot of these nutrients that we need. We don't need to supplement for everything.
yeah.
Right? So really honing in on, somebody who's got a really big vitamin D variant, including a lot more, mushrooms and things that are full of vitamin D and Bs. Like eat your Bs. Yes, supplement, but eat your Bs. We don't want to just be supplementing these variants. We need to be eating more of these as well. So knowing those nutritional deficiencies really helps tailor the micronutrition in a
Right.
diet or a nutrition plan.
Yeah, because I was told, Lois told me how I needed to supplement with vitamin A. Manganese, I think, was another one that I didn't do great with. Maybe magnesium, but there was a couple that I had no, it was just one of those things I had never even considered. Like, I didn't consider taking vitamin A or manganese. I was like, what?
Yeah, manganese. Manganese for
Yeah,
your oxidative stress protection, right? That boosts
right.
your oxidative stress protection where you carry 100%, but it's also in your hormones. So your
Yeah,
your estrogen variances will also call for manganese. So sweet potatoes, brown rice, fantastic, right? You got most people like, oh, I'll have, white rice or pasta or a white potato with as a side. It's so easy to switch your white potato to sweet potato and eat that 5 days a week instead.
yeah,
And then you get that
yeah.
manganese with the fiber. And then, sweet potatoes is a wild yam, which actually boosts progesterone. So three
Yeah.
ways it's actually reducing your estrogen and just bringing you back into balance, fixing your gut health, making things work. And simple switches like
Optimizing
that
your
that you would never
epigenetics.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I love this. And, I was going to just say, because I'm always telling women that no, very rarely is somebody's hormone profile going to be the same as the next person's. Like, and we all need something very individual. We all need something different. And a lot of it comes down to our genetics. And one thing that's really popular right now is testosterone pellets. And you put these pellets in, once you get them in, you can't get rid of them for 3 months. Had I ever done something like that, I would have blown up with water retention and had total pizza phase with cystic acne and lost my hair and grown a beard and maybe a clitoris because I like
You're
that.
right. You're right. So well done. You've done your research on the variations
Yes.
that you got. You would totally have become this a testosterone monster.
Yeah, because I don't metabolize it very well because I've got the UGT, well, I can't even remember what it is, UGT enzyme, some sort of SNP variant, whatever.
Yeah,
But
UGT.
I
Yeah, it's
know
yeah.
I don't do well with it, and I convert high to DHT, and then I don't get rid of it. And so whenever I've had too much testosterone replacement therapy, and because I played around with my doses in the past, and I was put from my doctors, they were like, take 20 milligrams a week of testosterone cypionate injections. And but I think by the third shot, a couple days later, my whole face broke out. I had gained like 5 pounds of water weight. I was growing whiskers, black whiskers around my chin. I'm
Yep.
like, whoa, and then you look at my genes, and that's exactly what it tells me. And so I proved it to myself. And so now I know I can't do high doses. And somebody like me doing pellets would have been an absolute disaster. And I can't tell you how many women have come to me saying, "Oh my, I gained 20 pounds when I did these pellets. I had lost my head hair," like horror stories.
Well, and
And
you
it's
hate
like
for
they
people to
probably
do
have the
this.
genes
Well,
then.
doing this by trial and error, or because it's the next solution in line to try and deal with
Yeah.
another issue you're trying to deal with. So it's not that no one's trying, like none of our medical practitioners are trying to create the problems. It's just that there isn't the insights that we can do now through the Dutch test and through the DNA testing to get the insights at another level, which help to avoid some of these pitfalls.
hmm hmm And so the DNA testing, like we can wrap this up because it's I feel like it's a first step or something that if you're not doing well with your HRT or if you have a lifetime history like us three of hormonal issues that just we've always had them, right? endometriosis and bad heavy periods and this kind of thing. If that's you and you're going, yes, like I have this history of constantly having these issues down below, or with my hormones. I think then instead of throwing supplements and trying to figure like, oh yeah, that sounds like that'll help or that'll help, get the genetic testing done. The great thing is it's not expensive it's not like ridiculous expensive. And you can do this for, I think your guys, I should ask because
It's
it's been a while since I got mine.
It's US about US 375. I'm converting to the Americans on
That's
this. About
great.
it's
Yeah.
4.99 Canadian. We've got a $50 off Canadian coupon, which is Karen Martell, that can be applied to get $50 off. And in our testing, we're covering 70 different areas and
Yeah.
250 genes related to day-to-day health that can support you. And in that, it includes a consult with some of our uh, nutritional or with some of our nutritionists. So you can book you book a review. So it's included in that to make sure someone walks you through the report to help you understand it. It's just green and red, and here's your recommendations, and then piles of other
Yeah.
pages you can or can't. You don't have to read. It's up to you. What we're just trying to, as quickly as possible, show you the evidence in a graph that you've got a problem, and then here's your recommendation.
Yeah.
When you know it now, it's so hard to find out for sure what the problem is. So we provide that first step. But that's your lifetime roadmap. We don't know where you are today, but we can see if you've got lots of variations in the hormone panel, go get a Dutch panel done. You need to see if these things are out of balance or out of regulation. Do some follow up, with the practitioner then to get some more insight. Try and figure out a
Yeah.
diet that now hits these soft spots. So DNA testing is often the best first step you can take.
Well, I was going to say, okay, so for 325, like you think about what a supplement nowadays costs you, right? A bottle of supplements going to be what, $90? So there's 3 bottles of supplements that you could be saving yourself from spending money on that you don't need. And all of the trial and error with the diet, like trying to figure out what's the best way for me to eat genetically to support my genetics, like all that guesswork gets taken out. So I think it's such a valuable test to have, and we've definitely dove into the intricacies of this. And you guys don't have to remember all of these things that we're talking about. I wanted to take a deeper dive on this today because this stuff is, I think, fascinating. I think my listeners are also usually quite well educated and they want the deeper dive. But when you get your test, it is very simplified. And it is like, oh, this is what this means. And this is what this means. You don't need to remember all these CYA, 1P1.
In
And
fact, we even hide that in the back of the report because it doesn't
we
really help.
do.
It's
Yeah.
just we give them other names to help make it a little bit more useful. And then but then you're getting, oh, here you need more. Here's some vegetable. Here's some of the antioxidant vegetables you should have. Maybe you need something with a little bit more, take some more magnesium. Maybe there's some supplements you want to consider. So it gets you at least started on a path that is eating and working with your body versus against it.
Yeah. And I really wanted to do it. That what drove me to get it the first time was I wanted to know if I had the Alzheimer's ApoE4 gene. And I do. And it's high. Like I think I got two, I can't remember I have 2 copies, 3 copies. I can't
No, you
remember.
only do one. You're the E3, E4. So
E3,
it's not
E4.
that E4, E4 is higher than that. You're E3, E4.
Okay. So I'm moderate
You're
risk.
but it's a higher risk definitely than the average population.
Yes. Okay.
But our
But
belief
I
is
wanted to
again
know that.
that it's around pathways and diet and toxins and getting metal out of the brain and
Yeah.
doing lots of greens so that you don't have a problem with heavy metals accumulation and things like that. So there's lots of great steps a person can take, and it empowers you to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, I was really happy to know. I remember my mom was like, "Oh, don't ever want to find that out." I'm like, "Why not though? There's so many things that you can do to help prevent Alzheimer's and dementia. And if you knew you're at a higher risk, her dad died of it. So that's why I wanted to know. Like, wouldn't you want to know the things that you should be doing right now to help prevent it, like using estrogen replacement therapy? Hello, it's like one of the best things we can do for our brains. And so now I'm on top of it. And I got her on estrogen too, and she heard about that. So I think those things are important to know. Another one that you taught me before we go here. I know we're over time, but was about the concussions. And I remember you telling me, Lois, that your kids had one of them had it, or maybe both, but
No, they're
more,
twins. They both have it.
they both have it. Okay,
Yeah.
so then you're more susceptible to damage from concussion, correct?
Yeah. So what happens is the brain, it goes to try and repair, but it plaques in the area and doesn't clear over time. And so you get
Oh,
decreased blood flow and decreased recovery from concussion. So if a person has the APOE E4 variation, you really need to seek support if you have it. And for parents, for their kids, you need to think carefully. I pulled my kids out of contact sports just to reduce some of the risk of concussion for them because they'd already suffered some, and I could see it having an
wow.
impact.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that, and that's always stuck with me is I want to get my son checked for it because before he goes into he wants to be a wrestler. And I'm like, "Oh, well, we better do some genetic testing then."
I tell people to wear a helmet no matter what they do.
No
I
matter
said
what.
no fall is too small. Wear a helmet.
Yeah. And so if people get the genetic testing, could they then choose to work with you, Unique?
I'm one of the consultants they can book with through
Yeah.
the DNA Power. So once they buy their test, we send them a swab. They do their swab, they send it back. Once they get the results, they'll get a booking link to be able to book with one of our certified consultants. They're all fantastic. But
Mhm.
yes, more than happy. My link is on there. All of
So
our
people are
consultants
going
are
to
there.
want to
They can
see
book with
you.
anybody. Oh, of course. There's myself and Avery who specialize in hormone. Avery specifically in perimenopause, menopause, myself from any stage. I mean,
Okay.
I've gone through from puberty to menopause. I deal with all women.
And we do
Amazing.
refer people. So after DNA Power, they have their report review. You have the opportunity to book to do programs with people like Unique and Avery and
Okay.
others, and or going to Dr. Seema or others, because it's now you've got to figure all of this out and it's more detailed. That you've got some answers, but now what? And
Hmm.
so it's how do you now start thinking about what you want to be doing based on the genetic variations that you have?
And 45
Amazing.
minutes goes quick. I mean, look at our
I
podcast
bet.
alone
I
today, right?
know.
So
And I
we
feel
do our
like we
best to get
literally
through the
just
report,
scratched the
but
surface.
we did. Yeah.
I love this stuff because I've wanted to learn more about it, and it's an area that it's overwhelming to me because it's such a big area. Like there's so much to know about genetics that it's just like, oh my gosh, I can't even go down that road. So I have recommended your guys' test for the last since of our first interview, and if anyone wants to do genetic testing, I'm always sending them to DNA Power. And then they'll be like, okay, can you look at all of this for me? I'm like, no, I cannot. Sorry.
Well, we've got people who can do
Please
that
go
for you
get,
then.
yeah. I'm like, can you just go see an expert that this is what they do? And you want to because you want to get the most out of that report. And so I think it does take seeing somebody that this is all they're doing or this is what they've been trained in. I'm not trained in it, so I can't do it. I
Over the
just know how
years,
valuable it is.
But you have wonderful supports that people will use once they know
Yeah.
what their challenges are.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so everybody can get $50 off the Total Power or the Total Power Connect kit, which is going to give you 70, what did you say, 71 markers?
70 plus areas of
70 plus
day-to-day health.
areas.
Yeah.
Okay. And the coupon is Karen Martell. I'm going to put this all in the show notes, you guys, so you can just click through. But like I said, I think it's a big, huge piece of the hormone puzzle that I hope every woman will do at some point in her life. I always say that with the Dutch test too. Like you just want to see, you got to get this base of how do you do with your hormones when it comes to how you're metabolizing it? Which areas do you need to support? And then on top of it, you're going to get all this other information for your health, which I think is amazing. And
And
priceless.
you
everybody
only
should
do
do
it
it.
once.
Only
So
doing it.
that's the
Yes.
benefit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Amazing. Well, both of you, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've loved this. Thank you for the
It's been an
conversation.
honor.
Yay. So fun. Thank
Yeah.
you so much,
Gonna have
Karen.
to have you
Great to
back
be
for
with
the
you.
fourth time, I think.
Marvelous.
Anytime.
Right? We can talk about genetics all day long. All
Perfect.
right, ladies, thank you so much.